You are listening to Be Amplified, the podcast with Brie and Thais, episode 43. Hey Amplifiers, welcome to Be Amplified, the podcast. My name is Thais.
And I'm Brie Seeley. We are the co-founders of the Amplify Collective,
a movement aimed at radically disrupting how purpose-driven women connect and operate in the world.
Because we believe it's not just what you do, but who you are that matters.
Each week, join us for messages and interviews that will leave you feeling amplified and ready to change the world.
Let's do this.
Well, this is weird. I don't know how I feel about this. But I'm in my closet on one side of the city.
And I'm in my closet on the other side of the city.
We should rename our podcast to Long Distance Los Angeles Relationships. Because I feel like this is the epitome of Los Angeles living.
Right? So for those of you, I have not been feeling so well this morning, and I was just like, I don't think I can do an hour in the car. So Thais and I still committed to recording this morning. We're just doing it a little differently. So this should be a fun experiment.
What I do like about it is that I have a lot more space in my closet.
I am a little more comfortable in my closet than I usually am in yours.
And there is no one eating bananas or
no almonds.
Nuts. This is good. This is really, really good. So,
good morning, Amplifiers. Clearly, Brie Seeley and Thais Guy here to entertain you, as always, on a Monday morning.
On a Monday morning, we have an epic guest today. I'm really, really excited to bring Angela Lauria onto our podcast a little bit later of this session. I was about to say a little bit later today. It is not. No, it is. Well, it is later today, but anyway.
Like 20 minutes later.
Yeah, 20 minutes later. But first, let's chit-chat for a hot minute.
Oh, let's.
Do you want to introduce the topic?
Sure. So one of the things that Angela will be talking about, which is something that just fascinates me, is this idea of expanding your container. So we all have comfort zones in all these different areas of our life. Like, you know, I'm comfortable holding this much wealth, and I'm comfortable being in these kinds of environments, and I'm comfortable hanging around with these kinds of people. And Angela will tell us a story where she boldly increased her container way, way out of her comfort zone. But the reason she did it is because it forced her to be successful. And so I love this idea of us getting out of our comfort zones, you know, increasing our capacity to hold more, you know, bigger, exciting things in our life. And so I just wanted to open up the conversation this way because I think it's fascinating, our human psyche, about how we get into these comfort zones and then how we do everything in our willpower to not get out of those comfort zones. And then here's Angela, who purposefully was like, fuck this. I'm going to shatter my comfort zone and like drastically change it, force myself to be successful because failure's not an option, and see what unfolds from there.
Well, it's interesting when I look at, let's say, some CEOs that, run these multi-billion-dollar companies. I'm talking about the big CEOs. And I think about what they have to hold, what type of container they must hold. It seems so massive. And I feel so inadequately prepared for that type of container. But what's interesting is for them, it's, yes, they may have expanded a little bit into that CEO role, but it's not like they're, you know, completely out of the ballpark in terms of what they can contain or what they can hold. And so what makes these individuals any different than me? Or let's talk about, you know, Taylor Swift or, you know, these performers who are performing in front of like 20 million people, you know,
yeah.
while I would
imagine holding the energy for that size audience.
And it's funny, you know, I know that a lot of times you say, oh, I'm ready. Like, I'm so ready to have that type of have that type of container. But then we do a Facebook Live and there's 2 people on a Facebook Live and we're freaking the fuck out. So it's really fast for her. that type of container is no longer a new thing. But in the very beginning parts of her journey, of course, I don't think she would have been capable of holding a container for the amount of people that she holds now. Anyway, so it's so interesting how I don't see myself, or I'm sure, you don't see yourself as, let's say, a different type of human than Taylor Swift or CEOs, right? We are all the same. So what is it about some individuals that allows them to hold bigger containers than others? And I feel like it's exactly that. It's how much of a commitment we have on a day-to-day basis to expand our container.
Yeah, and I think too, it's for me, the thing that drives me to expand my container on a regular basis is this just deep calling that I have. Like I wake up every day uncomfortable being like, I'm not doing enough in the world. Like I have a vision that I have to impact these lives. And so for me, I almost can't keep my container the same size every day. Like I just have this deep soul yearning to like do bigger things in the world. And, I don't personally know Taylor Swift, but my impression of her would be that she wouldn't be satisfied, you know, playing in bars for the rest of her life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then to, couple this conversation about this yearning and this desire and this kind of dissatisfaction in the Buddhist tradition, there is, one of the first noble truths, actually the first noble truth that Buddha shares is this idea that life is suffering. And he uses the word sukha. And when you look at the definition of sukha, suffering is just one of the ways that the English language attempts to explain this word. But another way, another definition is dissatisfaction, that we as humans are consistently dissatisfied with where we're at. And that leads to a lot of pain because we're consistently and constantly yearning for the next. And this desire is burning a hole through our capacity to be where we're at. So let's talk about these two dynamic forces, which is on the one hand, this dissatisfaction leads to a lot of obvious burnout and feeling unhappy and feeling unfulfilled and feeling like we're not doing enough, and then on the other side there's definitely an amazing, incredible experience that we all have when we decide that the status quo is no longer supporting us and we crave to do things in a bigger and bolder and a better way.
Yes. So what's that like look like for you?
I don't know. I mean, gosh, I feel like this is a really, really good, uncomfortable topic because it feels like it's so easy to go into one extreme or the other. And I feel like that's what a lot of people do, right? They go into fuck desires. Desires only leads to wanting more. You're never going to be satisfied, right? A lot of religions choose this point of view. So, the goal is to not have any desires and to be fully content in the moment. But then we have to kind of balance that with, well, but we have big goals. And I feel called to sing in front of 20 million people. And I feel like this is the work I'm supposed to be doing in my life. But I also don't want to be constantly unhappy that I'm not where I think I should be yet.
Pause. I would like to see that.
Like to see what?
You singing in front of 20 million people. Anyways.
I would break glass. I mean, no one wants to hear me sing. No one.
It's interesting because there is this like kind of quote unquote negative aspect of this dissatisfaction, right? Like you said, like I'm never going to get there and I'm not doing enough and like all these things which can be super debilitating. And for me, I know personally that's what fuels me. And so I think there's an energy distinction between allowing that dissatisfaction to either allow you to feel broken or use it as fuel to like really kickstart you to like, move forward. I think of like the fiery Aries, energy of just like having that match strike and then, just moving forward. And so I don't know. I mean, I vacillate definitely between the two where I have days where I'm like, I'm not doing enough. I can't get out of bed today. I just want to lay around with the cats, And other days where I'm just, I have that fire and I'm like, getting up, I was up at 5:30 this morning and, have been on fire since 5:30 this morning. And I feel really good and I'm excited and I'm feeling motivated, but I don't know what's the difference between the two for you? Like,
Well, it's interesting. So I had a previous boyfriend relationship where he felt fully satisfied in his contribution to the world, and he felt like what he was doing and where he was, like this is it for him. Like he didn't have any further ambitions than what was happening in his life, and at the same time he wasn't experiencing, like, my impression was that he wasn't fully happy and alive and joyful either, which is the tenet for why one should release their desires. And to me, it was so frustrating because I have these big growth desires, and I felt like he couldn't meet me with his lack of ambition.
Mhm.
So again, it's adding, let's say, another layer. Lack of ambition doesn't necessarily mean satisfaction and fulfillment. Just like having a desire for more also doesn't mean a lack of fulfillment and satisfaction. So maybe we should delayer it a little bit and say you can have all of those options in all of the spectrums, and maybe that's exactly it, Brie. Maybe it's an energy force, a decision, not a decision, yeah, an energy of like, okay, I don't have what I want right now, but I really feel good in the process, and I'm expanding my container, and it's uncomfortable, but it feels really good to be where I am because I know I'm eventually going to get to that place because I'm doing all these things, versus I'm just not going to do anything and I'm just going to, be here, but not really be satisfied either.
So interesting because I've actually been playing with this a lot. So I've said, like, I want to own my own condo in downtown Los Angeles. And so, of course, you know me, I'm like, within the next 18 months, and it's got to look like this, and da 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 da, and all these things. And I had a moment where I was like, wait, pause. I have literally been in my place that I'm currently in for 6 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, and I've said this is my dream place. I walked in and was like, I have seen this place before. When I was a little girl, this is the kind of place I dreamt about. And I'm like, so here I am. I got what I wanted. I've only been in it for 6 months, and now I'm like, awesome, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I had to pause like last week, and I was like, wait a minute. It's good, like we said, to have this dissatisfaction and whatever, but like, what if I can be expanding my container without having to like push and still enjoy my place? Because I love my place and I don't need to buy a condo. And so I've been playing with this a lot lately where I can still look at listings online, I can still go to open houses, but I feel like I'm approaching them with a more expansive energy versus like, okay, on to the next thing.
So maybe that's it. Maybe it's this idea of pushing. Like maybe you can totally have any desires that you want. Let's say you have a desire to own a private jet, and that feels really cool for you and you're really excited, and you put it, a picture of jets everywhere because you love it, and you look up different jets and you're doing whatever, you're doing your research, but you don't have that push, that sense of, if I don't own this fucking thing right now, it's saying something about me. And what it's saying is that I'm broken and that I'm inadequate and that I'm not good enough because I don't have it in my life right now.
Yeah.
Versus, right, being able to buy something right now so you fulfill that desire, and yet still feeling fully dissatisfied because you realize that the attainment of this thing doesn't actually fulfill the deep part of you that feels broken and inadequate, and that this thing is supposed to define you.
Yeah, I think it could be a really fun energy to kind of tap into and play with. There's a way to strive for what you want in the future while being fully present in the moment. I know a lot with manifestation, everyone's like, well, you're not living in the moment because you're constantly in this like future energy. And I think maybe what we're saying is that it's a combination of those two things. Like, how can you be fully satisfied in the moment and still want more? It's not, you and I talk a lot about and or.
Yeah.
It's an and situation.
Yeah. Yeah. And, something that I've really been practicing before I make a decision that could alter my reality and expand my container in some way, I ask myself, why am I investing in this? Why am I buying this? Why am I making this decision? Is it because I feel like getting this thing will fulfill some ultimate thing within me? Like it will make me appear a certain way, or it may, fulfill this idea that I have about myself? Or is it because I genuinely want this thing and it's going to add more joy into my life? So,
Hmm.
an example is, I'm obsessed with the Porsche Macan, fucking obsessed with that car. See that car ever. Anyone who knows me knows how obsessed I am with this stupid car. And it's the number one luxury SUV, so it's not in the lower price point by any capacity. And there was a point where I was like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna buy it and deal with the consequences later. And I sat in that energy for a good 15 to 20 minutes of like, I'm just gonna buy it. Like, I'll figure it out. Like, I'll figure out the money as it comes. I'll make it happen. I always do. I've always been able to pay my bills. Like, maybe this will expand my container, kind of like what, Angela did. Maybe this will expand my container and it'll force me to take, some elements of my business more seriously, et cetera, et cetera. So I sat in that energy. And about halfway through, I realized it's just a car and it's not going to change anything about my life for more than what, a month? Like, when does the excitement of a new thing leave? Maybe 2 months? Like, I love my car, so maybe it would affect me every time I drive, but is it really going to fulfill this desire that I have to look a certain way and be a certain person, like be the person who drives a Porsche Macan and what that means? And I realized that in that moment, this fuck it energy was the total wrong energy to make a decision from, because I was only going to put myself in more risk for a reward that was going to leave me feeling dissatisfied at the end, because the answer doesn't come from more stuff. And, probably 3-4 months down the road, I'd be like, okay, now I'm obsessed with this thing and I have to buy this thing and I have to have this thing. And so now I've been able to really sit with this desire of wanting a Macan. I still do. I am going to have this car. I know it. I'm not ready for that right now and where I'm at in my life. But it's gonna happen because I really want it, and so I trust that it's gonna happen and it's gonna feel really good. Maybe I'll be able to pay it up front and I won't have to worry. Or, who knows? But it's a different energy. It's a more of a trusting space of like, I'm gonna have it, so why do I have to stress the fuck out about it right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Because then you have on the other side what Angela did, right? And how she expanded her container in such a big way. And maybe
Well,
for her, the energy was different.
and I feel like as you were talking, I was like, okay, so what's what's my experience with this? And I feel like when I expanded my container into my new place, my rent payment went up significantly because I was Airbnb before. I was only paying $300 a month in rent before. And that went up significantly. And I was terrified about it, but I decided to expand the container. And what I've found in living here is that it doesn't like fulfill a hole within me or whatever, but I've started looking at myself differently because I've stepped into that larger container, that vision of my future. And now instead of seeing myself as the woman who wants that, I see myself as the woman who created that.
Right, but
And
the energy of which you got this new apartment, like I remember when you were looking, it was because you just felt like it was time for you to live on your own. It was time for
yeah,
you, you were having the resources, the money was coming in, and you felt that it was time for that upgrade. And you lived in a 2-bedroom for a very long time, and you did the Airbnb, and that felt good for a while, but then it
yeah,
stopped feeling good. I feel like
yeah.
that's the difference. Like, I have nothing to complain about with my current car. There's
We
nothing
love,
wrong. Oh, go ahead.
I said, we love Prince.
Yeah, his name is Prince. He is a he, because I don't know why cars have to be a she. Yeah, I love Prince. He's driven me everywhere and I feel very happy with him. So I'm not even dissatisfied with where I'm at. I just feel like that next car is going to mean a lot more than what it really means.
Mm,
And maybe that's it also. Like, really looking at, why do you really want 20 million people in your audience? Like, why do you feel like that's some sort of validation that because you have that many people, that makes you a good singer? Because I feel like Taylor Swift is a mediocre singer. So, it's like, look at some really outstanding singers that no one really knows about. Does that mean that they're less than because they have less followers? So what is it that you really want? Maybe it's you really, really just know that your message or your voice or whatever was just meant to hold that larger container, and it doesn't mean anything about you except that that's just what you want. And so I feel like, yeah, it's that kind of energy of really looking at, why is it that I really want this? Am I ready to expand my container in this way? What does readiness mean? Is it going to be uncomfortable? What does that mean? And what am I willing to do once I get there to continue to expand my possibilities?
This was a good conversation.
I know. I didn't expect us to go into this route, but it's good.
So good.
And it's good for, and obviously Brie and I don't have a clear answer here. This is something that we just started thinking about this morning. Maybe tomorrow I'll have a clear aha. But for now, it's just, I think, really important for you listeners to just be thinking about your desires and maybe start to look at, why is it that I want what I want? Like, why is it that I want a $7 billion business? Like, what about that is going to mean something? And just really investigate, like, are you making it mean something about you? Or are you looking at the impact? What is really there?
Yeah.
That's it. That's all I have. Yeah.
Mic drop. Well, let's bring Angela on. And before we bring Angela on, we just want to invite all of you that are here in LA to consider joining our really epic membership. Brie and I were talking right before we started recording how someone that Brie knows went up to her and was like, "Oh, don't you actually, Brie, why don't you say the story, since it's fucking your story?" Well, thanks. I had someone ask me, like, "Oh, what events do you go to in Los Angeles to, expand your community and blah, 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 blah." And I was very honest, and I said, I really don't go to events. There's a few exceptions. One of our podcast guests, Sarah Moshman, just released her documentary, and I went to see it.
That was amazing.
And yeah, so amazing. So, like, I go to things like that. But in terms of networking events, I don't really go to any. And part of the reason is because Thais and I host 4 to 5 events a month.
Yeah.
And that's my community. Like, those are my women.
Mm-hmm.
Like, those are the women that I can laugh with and cry with and have, like, super deep relationships, which will mean more to me ever than any business card exchange will ever mean.
Yeah, so most of the events that we host are for our membership, for our Coterie women, and it's a really great opportunity for, if you're new to LA, or if you're feeling extremely lonely, or if you're stepping into this entrepreneurial space and you have a lot of time and you don't have maybe the accountability you want. This is a great community of women that will be the resource and will be the support system for you. It's amazing. Like, it's like instant friends. Like, our women just click together so well. They become friends long after our events. It's a really cool space.
Yeah.
So you can learn more on our website. Just go to www.theamplifycollective.com /membership, and you get to learn all about the Coterie. And we look forward to welcoming you into our collective.
Cool. Let's bring Angela on.
Let's bring Angela on.
Okay, amplifiers, we are here on yet another beautiful Monday with a fabulous guest. Let me tell you a little bit about her before we bring her on. Dr. Angela E. Lauria is the founder of the Author Incubator and creator of The Difference Process for writing a book that matters. She hosts Page Up, a podcast which provides inspiration and information for authors who want to leverage a book to reach more people with their message. Helping people free their inner author since 1994, Angela has helped over 250 authors reach Amazon bestseller status in at least one category in the last 2 years. In addition to her work as an editor and ghostwriter, she's the author of The Incubated Author, 10 Steps to Start a Movement with Your Message, and The Difference, 10 Steps to Writing a Book That Matters. Her new book, Publishing Reimagined, How to Use Amazon to Exploit Your Own Rights and Why You Should, will be released by Difference Press in 2017. Her clients have been seen everywhere from Vanity Fair to O Magazine to The Today Show. And she lives at the Author Castle in McLean, Virginia with her husband, Paul, her son, Jesse, and their castle cat.
That's amazing.
Welcome.
Hey, thank you guys for having me. I'm like, that sounds exciting. Who is she? I kind of want to meet her.
Isn't that the best? I've had those times too where people introduce me and I'm like, she sounds awesome.
Also, I'm from Frederick, Maryland, so we're not too far.
Right. One of my favorite authors is from Frederick. We have an author. We have an author from Frederick, and we've been in the Frederick newspaper.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, so have I.
That's very exciting.
Have you been to Frederick?
Only to Voltaggio, that restaurant?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, you need to go more often. That downtown Frederick is the best spot in all of Maryland. All of it.
And there's also a what is it called? It's like it's not a winery, but there's like a booze, like a moonshine place we go up there.
Oh.
It's awesome. They make the best limoncello.
I don't know if I've been there.
Yeah.
I thought I've been everywhere in Frederick. Yeah, you have to give me the scoop, Angela.
It's a great little town you got there and not too far from DC. So.
No, yeah, it's pretty perfect. So, okay, back to the topic at hand. Let's talk about, how do you like to live an amplified life? Like, what does that mean to you?
Well, my story really goes back to when my older sister's best friend was killed on Pan Am 103 back in 1988. I was 15 years old, and we were studying in English class Walden by Thoreau. And I got to this line that said, I went to the woods to live deep and suck the marrow out of life so that when I died, I wouldn't find that I had not lived. And I think that probably wouldn't have meant a whole lot to me at 15 if I didn't read it the night that Trisha was killed in a terrorist attack. And I just really got it. Like, I really got that Trisha had died at 20 and she had lived deep. And there were alternatives to that. And I just made a decision from that moment on that no matter how hard it was, that my goal wasn't just to be like happy or just to be content, but it was to live deep. And in fact, I'm 43 now. I'm almost 44, but on my 40th birthday, I even got live deep as a tattoo. So that's kind of, I have a really great motivation and a really clear vision, and that helps me stay amplified.
I love it. That's amazing.
So what is one way that you have deepened this living deep for yourself in the last, say, like 2 or 3 years?
So like you mentioned earlier, we live in a castle on the Potomac River. I'm looking at the Potomac River right now. And I think that maybe when people on the outside see our company, they're like, oh, they're super successful. They live in a castle, and it probably sounds easy. But taking on, like, we had a pretty expensive mortgage. It was like $2,800 a month. And it wasn't like easy to meet every month. Like, it wasn't hard. Like, we weren't at risk of losing our house, but it was the biggest line item on our budget. You know, we had to find $3,000 every month. And then we came up with this idea to run events out of our home. And the cost of going from our house, just our like regular little house for $2,800 a month, we added a zero to the end. Our expenses, like our major house expense, went from $2,800 to $28,000 a month. And that was really scary. And I think that for me, staying on the edge and pushing myself, like that meant, for me, it meant doing a lot more business, growing my client base, getting more referrals, helping more people get their book written, being even more clear about my branding and messaging. Like, it was a huge risk. If we didn't make it work, there was not some other way to pay the rent. So I think I just try and stay a little scared, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That totally makes sense. And when you said 2,800, Brie and I looked at each other because a tiny little 1-bedroom apartment in Los Angeles is 2,800.
Right. I mean, that's real money, but it wasn't scary like 28,000 is, you know? Yeah. So I knew that for me, I always need to be a little bit, somebody uses the term like scared sighted, like scared and excited at the same time.
Oh, I kind of like that.
Yeah. That's kind of
Scared.
nice. Yeah.
Like I knew I could do it. I could see it on paper how we could get to 28,000 a month for, for the mortgage. But
How big is the space that we're
It's a
talking
castle.
about? But like, what a castle, like how castle-y is this castle?
it's pretty castle-y. So it's 20,000 square feet. It has about a quarter of a mile of riverfront views. You could almost see Great Falls from here. So we're right near a waterfall, amazing sunsets. We have an indoor pool, a spa, a sauna, a hot tub, a massage room, a gym. Each of the 8 bedrooms are named after an author. So there's the Maya Angelou room and the Mark Twain room and the Virginia Woolf room and the Gatsby room and the Neruda room. And then we've got a huge ballroom that seats 150 where we do our events and a glass elevator.
That's amazing. Because why not? Exactly. So
we love how you think.
So let's talk about this concept of risk, because that's a huge risk to put so much, because when I look at my money, I think of fixed expenses and variable expenses, and the higher the fixed expenses, right, the more at risk my money is. And so I would love for you to tell us and to tell listeners a little bit about how was that transition for you of going from kind of this low risk life to this higher risk life? Like, what did that entail?
So I think it's all about, like, this is going to sound so woo-woo, but I think it's really all about like holding space. So like when I started in my career, I charged $10 an hour, which felt like a lot. This was in 1984, doing almost the same stuff I do today. And I remember when I got that first job offer for $10 an hour, and I had a 2-bedroom apartment in Alexandria, Virginia, and it was $860 a month. And like that felt like I felt pretty confident I could deliver $10 an hour in results. And like looking back on it now, I was probably like a pain in the ass employee. I was 21 years old. I bet I was late for work. I was working in theater. And so I would often be up until like 2 a.m. at the theater. And then I was supposed to be at work at 8. Like I probably gave $10 an hour worth of work because I was like learning the ropes. And over time, I started charging more and more. And when I was paying that $2,800 a month in my old house, I was charging like $100 an hour, which felt like a lot of money. Like over the course of 20 years, like that's a big improvement. And then I made this decision that instead of just selling my time, I was going to sell incredible results. And that was such a huge shift in just like who I am as a person. And it corresponded with me really coming out of a domestic violence filled relationship and doing a lot of personal growth work. It came out of being in jobs where I felt like I wasn't really respected. It came out of working with mentors that really saw things in me I couldn't see in myself in the way I do for my clients now. So when I started selling, instead of get my editing services for $100 an hour, and instead I was selling become a best-selling author that makes a difference for thousands of people and generates $10,000 to $30,000 a month from your book, that totally changed the space I was holding for other people. And obviously I charged accordingly. So I definitely don't make $100 an hour now. I make a lot more than that, but the results I get for people, like the pressure on me is much greater. And I had to do all that personal growth work. Like I was 100 pounds overweight, and doing the work to lose that weight is part of why I can hold this space. I was in a relationship where I was abused, and doing that work to get into another relationship and trust again is part of why I can hold this space. So I think there's a lot of things people might think that happened to me that are bad that now I have nothing but gratitude for, because I wouldn't be able to do the work that I do if those things didn't happen to me.
I love this, and I want to dive a little bit into what you said, because I get it. I get what you're saying, but maybe some of our listeners won't see the connection. What is the connection, Angela, between you losing weight and being able to hold space for others? Like, what is the connection between you leaving a relationship that, you know, was abusive, didn't serve you, to being in one that's fulfilling and doing that inner work to cultivate more trust in your new relationship? Like, how are those things correlated with holding more space for other people?
So I think at the core of my relationship with my first husband was that I really felt like I was super lucky to be able to like snag a husband and like fool him into marrying me. And then whenever he wasn't happy with me and would get like verbally or physically violent, I kind of thought like I am kind of a jerk. And I do kind of deserve, like, I kind of get where he's coming from. I wouldn't want to be married to me either.
Mm.
And so fundamentally, like, it may not seem like that's related to work, but that was also coming through with my clients. So if I knew I did a great piece of editing for them and I was like, this is what you should say with your book, and they came back and said, I don't like this, I would be like, oh, you're totally right. Like, I'm not good enough. You have better ideas. So I wasn't like standing in my power of what I saw and I knew and believing in myself. There was always a part of me that felt like at the core of all of this is what I used to always say to myself, like, I kind of just have a bad personality. And so if anybody's willing to hang around with me, like as a husband or as somebody who will pay me $100 an hour, like I'm pretty lucky to have them considering how crappy my personality is. So that's like, how can you hold space for people when you think you kind of suck?
Yeah. Where do you think that came from, Angela? Where do you think that lack of worth came from for you?
I mean, for me, ultimately, I think, my weight was where it came out. So, but I was overweight from the time I was 2. I was on my first diet at 10. I remember a lot of conversations when I was 8 about whether I should or should not have lost my baby fat at that point. And so like, I am broken was sort of for people who like loved me and cared about me and were doing their very best. But, there were people whispering about me from the time I was a baby and prelingual saying like, she is broken. That is not what a baby should look like. She is not good enough. And, they were worried about my health. Like, I'm not blaming them. It's just the way I internalized it all is like, I am fundamentally broken.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then I lost 100 pounds actually 4 times and gained it back. So the 5th time I kept it off permanently, but 4 times I lost 100 pounds and gained it back, which of course just proved I was broken.
Right.
So that worked out conveniently because until you change those beliefs, you'll always gain the weight back or start drinking or start doing heroin, or like you'll always prove whatever your truest thought is.
So what was that shift then from you being like, I'm broken to I'm gonna start doing this work and not be broken?
Yeah, the big decision for me was, and maybe this sounds kind of trite, but just like having a kid. And I'm going to say something I think people don't say very much, but I hated being pregnant. And I really did not like my kid until he was about 2.
That's amazing.
I was not a fan of the baby thing. And he cried nonstop for 18 months. Like,
oh my God.
It was not pleasant, which I think had to do with my energy for
Right.
sure. But when I left, there was a point where I was scared for his life and for my life. And when I left my husband, his dad, I just made a decision. I was going to figure out the core of the issue. Like, I wasn't going to keep doing that. So Jesse is now 11. He turns 11 shortly. And so it's been like a long journey, like a long, slow journey. But I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure out why I keep gaining the weight back. I'm going to figure out why I date jerks. And if it takes my whole life to figure that out, then that's what I'll do to be a good mom.
So what was like the first thing? Because I know a lot of times when people are getting started in this stuff, they're like, where the fuck do I even start? Like, what was
for
like
me,
the first
it was
thing?
weight loss. like weight loss is my greatest teacher. So I knew, so actually while we were either separated or divorced, or we weren't divorced yet. We were either separated or talking about separating, but Jesse was 6 months old and it was December 18th. And I had previously, when I was pregnant, I had a very stable job with a company where I wrote the business plan. And I left this stable job, burned a ton of bridges to take a big new fancy job in Montreal. So it was a different country. I'm American. I was living in Connecticut. This job was in Montreal. I was pregnant and I took this big fancy job. It was twice my salary. And on December 18th, not quite a year into the job, and right before Christmas, I got fired. And I got fired over the telephone. I was in Connecticut. I still had an apartment in Montreal that had all my stuff in it. And I was I flew up every Monday to Montreal. So I got fired. I tried to talk them out of it. It failed. And then I was like, well, I'll just fly up on the regular flight on Monday and get my stuff. And they're like, we're not paying for a flight. So I didn't feel like I had money to pay for my own flight. So I drove to Montreal. I cried the whole way. I packed my car with my stuff. It was like 2 or 3 days before Christmas. It was snowing. I was driving through Vermont and I stopped at a gas station. And I was just like soaked in tears, filling my car up with gas. And I remember having this thought, like, I am never, ever going to be in a position where I get fired from a job and I'm 315 pounds and I'm too embarrassed to interview for other jobs. And my marriage is falling apart. And if I can just lose weight, like, I'm going to focus everything on losing weight because then my husband will love me again and I'll be able to get hired. Like, that's what will make me lovable. So I was like, I have to lose 100 pounds and then I'll be able to focus on saving my marriage and getting a new job. So that was really like, that was a long time ago. That was like 10 years ago. It's actually February 7th, 2007. When I bought the book, If I'm So Smart, Why Can't I Lose Weight by Brooke Castillo. And that really started my weight loss journey, which turned out it wasn't about weight loss at all, but self-worth. But I never would have bought a book called If I'm So Smart, Why Don't I Have Better Self-Worth?
Marketing genius. So
exactly. It was just like, I thought the problem was weight loss. It was totally the symptom, but I had no idea. So whatever you think is the biggest problem in your life right now, your relationship with money, your relationship with your mother, the fact you can't get pregnant, whatever that symptom is that you think is the problem, that is the big arrow pointing you towards the underlying issue that you really need to work on.
Angela, first, preach. Second of all, like, you can walk in front of me and just shout this out to the world, and then I just get all the clients.
Pick up the biscuits. Because
this is exactly the work that I do around worthiness in my own business. And it's just so amazing at how we are so obsessed in thinking that this one thing is going to give us all of our worth and lovability. And it never ends up being that one thing, does it? It's like, you lose the weight, you still have the shitty relationships, you still have the shit sitting there waiting for you to look at.
Right. Well, that's the thing. It's like, even if you fix it, you're like, well, what I need is a hot guy. Yeah. And then you get the hot guy, then you'll be like, yeah, but the problem with him is he's so hot, it makes me insecure. And like, then you'll gain weight because you feel insecure because you want to drive him away. Like, until you treat that underlying worthiness, you'll always keep finding a new symptom. Yeah. And then once you work with a coach like you and you fix all that stuff, then you can help other people and then come see me and we'll write a book together.
Oh, done. Done.
So actually I kind of want to ask about that. So you talked about, you were obviously reading amazing books when you were 15 and now you help people write amazing books. So has literary stuff been kind of your jam? Like, how'd you get into this?
So when I was in third grade, I had two girlfriends, Jen and Sue, and both of their moms read self-help books. And I used to beg to sleep over, and I would take my sleeping bag and my Girl Scout camp alarm clock and this little twisty flashlight. And I'd set my alarm for like 3 or 4 a.m. And I would creep out to their bookshelf and I would steal a book like I'm Okay, You're Okay, sneak it back to my sleeping bag and stay up reading self-help books, 70s self-help books, 80s self-help books.
That's the best thing I've ever heard.
11 years old. It's ridiculous. I had a problem.
Clearly it was in your blood.
Yeah, and my favorite people, and I can tell you all of their names, and I'm still Facebook friends with them. Shout out to Barbara Borney, for an example, Bobby Borney. All the reference librarians at the Wallingford Public Library all knew me because I basically lived there. And would just read. I started reading. I read all the encyclopedia in alphabetical order, and then I would read all the self-help books in alphabetical order. And then I decided my career was that I was going to write. There was an encyclopedia in the reference section, and it was like the Encyclopedia of Contemporary Authors. This is all before the internet. And I decided there needed to be an encyclopedia of contemporary self-help authors. So in high school, this was like actually my college entrance exam. So in high school, I decided I was going to create a new encyclopedia that was just for self-help authors. And that's basically what Louise Hay did with Hay House. So by the 90s, I was a huge Hay House fan. And now like my goal, Louise Hay is still my hero. And I love all the original, Deepak and Wayne Dyer and Marianne Williamson, all the original stars of Hay House. But my goal in life is to discover the next Marianne Williamson, the next Wayne Dyer, the next Deepak before the world does. So I want to catch them right at the beginning of their career and be the person who published their first book.
Well, Angela, may I introduce you to my friend Thais?
Yeah.
I was just thinking, like, she's talking to she's talking to them. But then I didn't want to seem so pompous to say that out loud. So thank you, Brie, for saying what I was not going to say.
Yeah, that's the goal. And we've published, people like Susan Hyatt, Elizabeth D'Alto, Mike Rostowski. There's so many people that we've had the opportunity to publish. Amy Burks, who I know are right on the edge of doing some pretty amazing work. And I will always have done their first book with them. So I imagine them flying out of the nest after a few books. I have people who have done 7 books with me, 8 books with me.
Wow.
Cassie Parks, Sharon Pope. I think Jean Andrus is coming up with her 6th book. But I sort of imagine them flying the coop after a few years once they've learned these skills. And so we've built relationships with agents and bigger publishers to get people to the next level.
So Angela, let's say that we have a listener right now who's, wanting to maybe write a book, or let's get a little bit practical because I know this is your expertise. Let's say someone's thinking about going into the writer's realm. What's an advice or a tip that you could give them to kind of help them facilitate what's next for them?
Well, the biggest thing that I can say is when you're a new writer. So if you're Marianne Williamson or Beyonce and you want to write about anything, you can. So if Marianne Williamson gets a bee in her bonnet about cell phone usage, people will buy that phone. If Beyonce wants to write about worthiness, people will buy that book. But for most of us mere mortals who don't have millions of fans and followers, exactly. Nicely done. It's really important that your first book create your first 12 disciples. So you want your book, you don't want to write your book for everyone. You want to write the book for the 12 people who will get your message and go tell 144 people. So they each tell 12 people. And those 144 people each tell 12 people. So I call it thinking in concentric circles. So instead of writing, most people come to me and they want to write a book that I jokingly call Self-Love for Women in Transition.
That's every single self-help book out there.
Right. You can sell that if you're Beyonce, or if you have a couple $1 million in a trust fund that you are like we can get you the right branding people and make the right investments, that if you give me 2 to 3 years and $1 to $2 million, you can write self-help for women in transition. But if you're like a new coach with maybe 300 people on your emailing list or 3,000, and you're making $2,000 or $3,000 and you really want to be making $10,000 or $15,000 a month, then you need to solve a specific problem. So, for instance, one of my authors published a book yesterday on how to lose weight when you have to travel for business. So it's not everything like body love for women. That's really hard. Beyonce can sell that. You probably can't. But how to lose weight when you travel for business 50% of the time or more, that we can find those people. We can get your first 12 disciples. Your first 12 disciples are going to go get 12 disciples of their own, and we can grow your movement. The way we grow your movement is by funding it. So to fund your movement, we have to get you money up front that you can feed yourself with, and then feed back into your movement to grow it exponentially over time. So most of my authors, when they come to me, they're making $20,000 a year, something like that. And within a year, we can get them to 100,000. Within a year, a year after that, we can get them to 300,000. And then we've had people in their third year hitting 500,000, 800,000, a million in one case. So, but if you try and go from 0 to 1 million, you just end up exhausted. It's too big of a jump unless you have a lot to invest.
Right.
I love this.
That's amazing advice.
A specific problem.
Yeah.
I love it.
I love it. Thank you. So we're going to take our conversation with Angela to the next level in our extended cut version of this conversation. We joke that it's her opportunity to take her bra off and get really nitty gritty with us. So if you want to learn more about Angela and our extended cut, join our Facebook community. If you're not there yet, it's www.beamplified.community, not .com, .community, and you'll get even more yummy things from Angela. We would love to know, well, we want to know, and I know our listeners are going to want to know, where can they learn more about you and the brilliant work that you're doing?
So the Author Incubator, it includes the word "the" at the beginning. The authorincubator.com is the secret. And if they go to the authorincubator.com/gift, GIFT gift, there's a 2-hour workshop that I taught. And I'm just like giving that away right now. So if they're lucky, it'll still be up.
Amazing. I will be sure to add this to the show notes for all of you listening. Thank you, Angela, so much for sharing your divine wisdom with us. We so appreciate you getting vulnerable with us. And for those of you listening, you can check us out at all the socials at The Amplify Co.
And until next week, next Monday, go be amplified.